we ready?
You guys can go ahead. I just gotta start the Zoom.
How about TVs?
There's a white button on in the middle. I don't know if it's just back to sleep. We don't have video? We don't have video? You here in place of video, huh?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
he's
Alrighty.
Yep.
Okay.
Nice to see you.
Yeah,
I'm
nice
here.
to see you
I'm
too.
here in the office every Wednesday too.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, doing some
All
office
right.
hours. Yep. Good times.
That's a McKenna guy too. That's Wood.
That's Donovan.
Donovan
Yep,
Wood.
he's Smith.
Smith,
He is
okay.
leading the Mishta
Yep.
project. Yep.
Yep.
We're just all over the place.
Yeah.
It feels a little warmer now than when we first came in.
And just coming in from outside, it's chilly out there.
Yeah,
It's supposed to snow tonight.
yeah. And tomorrow. And
And
then
then-
rain on Friday when it warms up.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
All right, Zoom is up.
It's in the TV room back
I
there.
don't know.
I don't know.
You guys need a IT person.
Yeah.
Sophisticated technology in this
Yeah.
boardroom. Is Donovan going to be able to just plug in and go? Awesome.
You're the IT guy now.
I have the remote.
If you don't like it, you can change channel.
It's on NBC these days.
I'm just happy to finally see a lot of activity on that bridge.
Not going on the bridge. Are you guys involved at all, Eric?
That bridge?
Yeah.
Yeah, we did the design.
All the architectural drawings, right?
Yeah, we did I think we did everything, but our bridge team did the whole bridge design, yeah. And I'm not too familiar, but they did some architectural stuff.
For a little higher, but yeah, it looks like it's going to be about 8 inches higher than
I know they raised it a bit.
current. So we were hoping for the same as Belleville Bridge, but
That's what I was doing.
Oh,
Are you on the lake? Yeah. Nice.
I've been affected by that bridge for
Yeah.
how many days, Rosemary? 500 and something.
At the bottom. Rosemary, what's the paper say? How many days has the Denton Bridge been out? I'm sorry, how many days has the bridge been out? It usually,
700 and yeah.
That's a publishing macro. It automatically fills in.
They got a big crane and it's nice to see.
yes.
Grab the newspaper for our bridge engineer and toss it in his office when we walk by.
Perfect. I love it. Keep going.
Yeah, don't forget. I think it's out of our hands now, though. It's in
Right.
county's building it.
How are
now.
you? Where's
and
our esteemed
whoever
Mr.
built
Grant?
it, what it was
I don't
built
know.
in like what, the 1800s?
You couldn't tell the difference,
or
but it wasn't. No, just
something?
kidding.
When was it built?
Wasn't your week to watch him?
That they make it higher.
I'd have to go there and have
8 inches higher.
I'm trying to get TVs on before I start the meeting.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Who's in the back? Who's in the back room? I wonder.
Maybe there's nobody in there.
Perfect. Thank you. Yeah. It's all coming together.
The lights are on.
works.
we have Gage back. Cool.
Yes. Hey. Hey.
You guys can go ahead and get started. Second.
Good evening. Welcome to the Charter Township of Van Buren Planning Commission for Wednesday, December 11th, 2024. And I apologize for the late start due to some technical difficulties. So without further ado, I'd like to call the meeting to order. And could we all rise for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge of allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And could I have roll call, please?
Here.
Bernie Grant is excused. Peter Creel. Here. Medina Atchison.
Here.
Jackson Paul.
Jackson is excused. He had indicated to me that he will be about 30 minutes late today, so I apologize.
Jeff Jar. Here. Brian Cullen.
Here. At this time, we also have an agenda before us. Could I have an action on the agenda, please?
Through the chair, I make a motion we approve the agenda as presented.
Support.
We have a motion and support for approval of the agenda. Any discussion? All in favor signify by aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Next up is the minutes. We need the approval of the minutes from November 13th, 2024.
Through the chair, I make a motion that we approve the minutes from the regular meeting of November 13th, 2024 with one correction. On approval of the minutes, I made the motion rather than Brian Cullen. That needs just to be corrected.
On the agenda.
Yeah.
Yes. We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Support.
Motion by Treasurer Bud and supported by Commissioner Creel for approval of the minutes. Any discussion? With that, all in favor signify by aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. We don't have any correspondence, no public hearing or old business. Brings us right to item number 1, new business. It is case 24031, Costco Depot, Dry Depot Edition, preliminary site plan review. Excuse me. A request by applicant Ryan Hartsuff of MG2 on behalf of owner Costco Wholesale Incorporated for preliminary site plan approval to construct a 54,200 square foot dry depot addition and parking expansion. The site is located at 5860 Belleville Road on parcel V 125-83-013-99-0002-705. Can we have a presentation by staff? Director Akers?
Thank you very much. I apologize. Thank you very much. At this time, I will turn the staff presentation over to Mr. Belko, who's our planning consultant.
Mr. Belko.
Thank you, Mr. Akers, and thank you, Chair Cullen. The applicant, Ryan Hartstuff, on behalf of Costco Wholesale Companies, is proposing to construct, as you mentioned, a nearly 54,000 square foot addition. This is the third addition to the warehouse since its site plan was approved in 2014. There was a west side addition in 2018 and a recent addition to the east side just this year. And also this year was an approved rezoning of adjacent parcel as outlined in the planner's report, allowing that this use can be expanded into this parcel. It is now zoned M2. The addition number 3 and site expansion In terms of zoning and use, with the rezoned parcel and the use remaining the same, this is a permitted use, and it may continue as such. They are adding 36 new dry depot dock doors to the west side, 18 each for shipping and receiving. There will be no additional cold-wet depot doors, fumbled there. The total number of docks in the entire facility will be 298, resulting in a total building size of nearly 500,000 square feet. And we find that the number of docks to the ratio of floor area is compliant with the zoning ordinance. In terms of the required information, there is some additional data that we would need, clearly delineating the and labeling the dock parking, bullpen parking, and trailer parking on the site plan. We have some notes in the note box, but these should correspond with symbology on the plan. We note that there is future trailer parking still on the site plan for approval tonight. We ask that this be removed from the data table. Continuing on, I'm on item 4 for dimensional requirements. They have been provided as of this revised plan, and they do meet ordinance standards. The proposed addition matches the existing building height and is well within the 40-foot height limit. Item number 5, access and circulation. The location and number of curb cuts will remain unchanged, and there is no proposed access on Beck Road. There are also no changes to cross access or sidewalks. But when it comes to truck circulation, there have been a number of conversations regarding the truck routes to the highways from the Costco site. So in addition to numbering all of the new and removed parking, we reviewed a truck traffic study that was prepared October 31st, 2024, and it did provide some recommendations for the truck route solutions. These boil down to additional and redesigned interpretive signage on the existing Belleville guide sign. The report also suggests that informational flyers will be given out to drivers, and this should include all drivers, not just the Costco trucks. Township staff has worked with the applicant on the installation of the appropriate signage as it exists today at the Belleville Course Road intersection, and we recommend that the Planning Commission approve their proposed strategy to address this issue further. Further, I would like to note and clarify that the future growth projection on the site plan estimates that the facility will support up to 1 additional warehouse per year, increasing daily truck trips by 7 per year. The expansion itself will not immediately add more volume or traffic. Item number 6, parking and loading. We would like to have more clarity as to the updated and restated parking calculations for the entire site. Parking standards have changed, and they should be noted on the site plan, showing simplified math and requirements from the code. We have a sample table in there for their reference. We also need some more dimensions with some of the trailer and truck parking spaces to the west side of the site as well. But in terms of barrier-free and loading, well, there's plenty of loading space. So those are great. Item number 7, landscaping and screening. This part is a little extensive, but I'll try and breeze through it. Replacement trees, we'll talk about that in a little bit. But in terms of the green belt buffer to the west, this is an M2 site adjacent to an M1 site to the west. This requires 1 tree per 20 linear feet within a 20-foot buffer from that lot line. 50% of those trees must be evergreen. The Planning Commission had noted during previous approvals or during the time of rezoning that the subject site should provide screening to the existing residential uses to the west, and that this screening should be provided for any future approval. The paving plan identifies an 8-foot black vinyl chain link fence, but we do require some details to understand what that will look like. In addition, the Planning Commission will have to approve the additional height of the fence, which is currently allowed at 6 feet per ordinance, but the Planning Commission may extend that to 8 feet. The western green belt is required within 20 feet of the M1 parcel to the west. And this will provide room for expansion for the property. And we note that there are existing trees and foliage in the area. You'll note that there are some gaps in the proposed landscaping. The gaps will be filled in by any existing tree buffer, and I understand that the applicant is willing to supply additional trees. But the gist of it is that the green belt must be installed at this time. It'll help provide visual and sound mitigation. In terms of parking lot landscaping, which is required, a 5-foot area with hedge plantings, we recommend that the Planning Commission consider waiving this requirement, given the installation of loading area screening and the soon-to-be greenbelt buffer to the west. We find that this is not a typical parking lot, and it is visually screened in other ways. In terms of interior parking lot landscaping, these are the islands within parking lots, must be equal to 5% of all paved areas. We do need calculations for the total amount of paved surface area for the expansion and the area of the landscaped island to the north of the lot. I believe the applicant is willing to provide those details. In terms of the loading area screening, I mentioned the proposed 8-foot fence. The ordinance requires this fence to be planted with 1/3 of the surface covered by evergreen trees on the outside of the fence. Considering there is an extensive existing wooded area right along this property line, we find that not requiring these 8-foot evergreen trees in a double row on the other side of the fence would be permissible. Though we note that the fence must be shown on the site plan and landscape plans. And that, again, the Planning Commission must grant the height increase to 8 feet. Open space landscaping requires 1 tree per 3,000 square feet of remaining open space. We noted in our review that this can be located near the greenbelt buffer to help avoid any future damage through expansions. But we note, and we thank the applicant for pointing out, that there is extensive wetland area in this property. Combined with the planned future expansions and the existing wetland and trees within the area, it might not be feasible to supply the required 200-odd trees within open space that is mostly wetland. So we would like to see, in lieu of open space landscaping, consideration of expanding the greenbelt buffer, which is required along the west property line, approximately 400 feet across the north property line, starting at that northeast corner, to fully enclose this property with landscaping. That must be approved by the Planning Commission. We do require a method of irrigation to be noted, and there are some discrepancies with the tree removal permit, which is item 8 now. Looks like there are 15 trees being removed, so we'll need that to be updated. And we would like the survey and the landscape plan to distinguish which replacement trees are going towards the replacement requirement, because required landscaping can't count towards that. In terms of stormwater pond and engineering, I'll defer to the township engineer. Lighting, we find no issue. with the proposed lighting plan. It complies with the ordinance, and we have been provided manufacturer cut sheets for all fixtures. We find that for architecture and building details, we noted a concern with rooftop mechanical units, but we believe that this should be mitigated through sightline distance, which is rather extensive for this type of use. So we believe that this complies. We'll need confirmation that no additional dumpsters or compactors will be provided under this plan. And in terms of signs, the applicant shall coordinate with the township, county, state, and national regulations to update that existing guide sign on Belleville Road. One last note, 14, other. The site plan notes that the hours of operation will be 6 a.m. to 3 p.m. Monday through Saturday, and will require this site to comply with the noise ordinance standards, and any complaints received by the township will be processed as a nuisance issue. Overall, the applicant has addressed many of the comments provided during staff review. Some items remain outstanding. However, we don't believe these will impact the site design or layout, and approval can be conditioned on compliance being achieved prior to final approval. Therefore, we recommend that the Planning Commission grant preliminary site plan approval for the Costco Dry Depot addition, subject to addressing all of the comments noted in our report on a revised and dated set of plans. And we further recommend that the Planning Commission grant approval of a modification to raise the proposed fence height from 6 feet to 8 feet and waive the parking lot landscaping requirement. I'll also add that in lieu of open space landscaping, we recommend that the Planning Commission require the applicant to provide 400 linear feet of additional buffer landscaping along the north property line. All such changes will be noted in the revised site plan, and we will look forward to review and future approvals. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Lepick.
Thank you. At the request of the township, Fishbeck has reviewed the preliminary site plans dated November 1st, 2024, submitted to the township for preliminary site plan approval for the proposed Costco expansion on the west side of the building. There's a note I'd like to cover in our letter at the beginning here. There's some updated comments in here that are italicized and dated December 5th. We had submitted a letter December 4th, and right after that letter, we were supplied by the applicant with a stormwater management package and some additional information. So you'll see the italicized comments are provided below some of our other comments after review of the stormwater package. So in general, it was stated earlier here, there's a significant amount of wetlands on site. Per conversations between the applicant and the township and Fishbeck, the applicant is in the process of working with Eagle to acquire a wetland mitigation permit. The applicant has also indicated that there may be some additional wetland verification work that will need to happen in the spring of 2025. So the applicant should continue through that process and update the township as they work through that, as some of their expansion work is located on. They'll need to mitigate some wetlands, and it looks like some of their stormwater work will butt up against some existing wetlands that needs to stay. So that all needs to be permitted and approved through Eagle, excuse me. The water main, this is an existing site, so there is existing water main already on site. They're planning some expansion of the private fire loop and the public 12-inch water main that runs through the site. We've been working with the applicant and have directed them to extend their existing water main on site to the property line to the west and provide a stub with a valve. For sanitary sewer, the plans and the applicant have confirmed in the during staff review, there's no sanitary work at this time on here. Moving on to stormwater management, the applicant's proposing a full stormwater management system with a series of on-site catch basins and closed storm sewer that will convey runoff into a new stormwater detention basin that will be separate from the existing ponds on site. So the first italicized update, you'll see the applicant has submitted a stormwater management calculations package to the township. Fishbeck has reviewed the calculations and narrative, and Fishbeck also contacted the design engineer and discussed the stormwater management design in detail on December 5th. There was some concerns. The original site plan did not appear to have any stormwater management calculations, and we were looking to verify the size of the stormwater detention pond, as it was the way where they had it on the site. It was between wetlands, the existing ponds, the railroad to the south, and the parking lot to the north. So we were looking to verify that size. So they provided the stormwater management calcs. We were able to preliminary review it, and everything looked acceptable at that time. That being said, the stormwater package that they submitted to us, the applicant indicated that that also went to the county for their county submittal. So in typical procedure, the applicant should update us with the county permit. All the stormwater management work and design will need to be reviewed and approved with Wayne County. It does appear that there's some future parking that they have potentially planned even west of this current west parking lot and building expansion. That was shown on the stormwater management package and was included in the stormwater calcs for their detention pond. So in summary, just continue. The applicant and all future submittals provide all stormwater calculations for review to the township. Any Wayne County approval should also be provided as part of, provided to the township for review in our record. Paving and grading, all geometrics will be subject to review by the township fire marshal for accessibility for the fire trucks. And once we get to engineering, we will be reviewing ADA grades and for parking lots. Recommendations. So at this time, Fishbeck recommends the Planning Commission grant the Costco West Dry Storage Edition preliminary site plan approval based on our engineering feasibility review of the site plans. We ask the applicant continue to work with us in the county and Eagle for wetlands and update the township throughout the process and provide all correspondence and permit approvals for our record. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Thank you. Director Akers?
I will give an overview of the letter by the township's fire marshal dated December 5th, 2024. Some of the comments in the letter involve fire department access. The fire marshal indicated that the fire lane access for the addition is an extension of the existing access, which exceeds code requirements. So because of that, they will not require an emergency vehicle access plan. The fire marshal indicated that designated fire lanes were showed in the November 1st, 2024 submittal, complying with that section of the fire code. For water supply, the existing water main loop is a 10-inch PVC and has 12 private fire hydrants tied to the loop. The plans for the West End addition show the relocation of the 10-foot loop extended further south with 4 additional hydrants added. It said the hydrants are off 10 by 10 by 6-inch tees, which is compliant with the fire code. And then the last comment that was made was with regards to bollards on the fire department, and they had indicated that per the letter that Costco had provided dated October 30th, 2024, those bollards will be shown in the final engineering plans. So based on that comment, our fire marshal has recommended approval of the plan set. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Okay, thank you. Now, do we have presentation by the applicant?
Nothing to physically present to the board, but to address some of the comments and provide some additional input on those. As far as the 10-foot fence or the 8-foot fence goes, the reason for the 8-foot fence is to comply with the existing fence that is on site and also to comply with Costco's security standards, their corporate standards. As Gage mentioned, for the landscaping, we have gone through the process of implementing those changes that have been requested, and we will comply with those updated recommendations from McKenna. And if there's any other questions or concerns, I do have Dan Free with V3, our landscape engineering and civil consultant, and then also Larry Jurchek with Costco here to address any concerns.
Okay, thank you. Commission, questions, comments?
Mr. Chair,
Mr. Jar.
I would ask if the rest of the planning commission is in agreement with the recommendation in the McKenna letter regarding the waivers to the fence height and the landscaping requirements. My opinion is that it seems like it's pretty reasonable. I tend to go with McKenna on that one, but I want to know the rest of the group's opinion.
I would agree that I think that's fine.
Yes. Absolutely. It makes it more consistent if the fence that's already there is 8 foot to keep it, and it's on the west side, there's no visibility really.
Corporate standards don't usually hold a lot of water, but in this case, it seems very reasonable. I would also ask of Mr. Belko from McKenna, there's a recommendation for having the understanding that the applicant has to abide by the noise requirements. I was wondering if it would be an unreasonable thing to have in the final site plan actually calling out the noise requirement that should be met. Like we have an environmental performance standard, it's like 8102K noise, and a notation that it should be observed at all times. The applicant is required to do that anyway, but it might be a clarification on the plan, given that we had some public feedback about it. Would that be a reasonable thing to request?
Absolutely. Even just within the notes, I think is sufficient.
Yeah, in the notes section is what I was thinking, just so that it's clear to the applicant and any of their, the operating people or the folks constructing it that the noise is a concern. And it's good to have it on the plan so that everyone is aware that it was brought up, and we want to make sure that it doesn't become an issue for any of the residents that live nearby. Mr. Chair, I'd also ask, the plan had some recommendations regarding truck route posting and how it should be showed or handed out. I would like to know if the Planning Commission finds that plan to be acceptable as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Agreed.
That's really all the concerns I had, sir.
Okay, anybody else? Comments, concerns? Seeing none, do we have anybody from the public that would like to make comments? Anybody on Zoom, Director Akers?
We do have one person on Zoom, but their hand is not raised.
Okay. Seeing none, then I'd move on. Are we going to move on this issue?
Well, Mr. Chair, I could entertain a motion.
Would you please, Commissioner Jarr?
I'd be happy to. At this time, I would move to grant the applicant Ryan Harstuff of MG2 on behalf of owner Costco Wholesale Incorporated a preliminary site plan approval to construct a 54,200 square foot dry depot addition and parking expansion at the site located at 5860 Belleville Road on the parcel described in the agenda item. Based on the analysis and subject to the conditions detailed in The McKenna letter, the Fishbeck letter, the Van Buren Township Fire Report, all dated December 5, 2024, noting the feedback from the Planning Commission that we're in favor of granting approval of the modification to raise the proposed fence height from 6 feet to 8 feet and waive the parking lot landscaping requirement as described in the McKenna letter, with the additional feedback that the applicant shall add a notation on the plan that in addition to maintaining the stated hours of operation, environmental performance requirements of section 8102K noise, number to be verified, shall be observed at all times.
Do you want to, are we going to put on there the addition of the landscaping on the north end?
Open space,
Space.
in lieu of open space.
Mr. Belka, how would you suggest I amend that?
A recommendation to install 400 feet of linear buffer along the north edge of the property line in lieu of the open space landscape requirement.
That is exactly how I would amend that motion. Thank you, sir.
You're welcome. Okay, we have a motion.
Support.
We have a motion and support for the preliminary site plan approval. Any comments, discussion on the motion? Seeing none, roll call vote, please.
Dina Atchison, Peter Creel,
Yes.
Sherry Budd,
Yes.
Jeff Jar,
Yes.
Brian Cullen.
Yes, we do have, motion carries. We do have preliminary site plan approval. Thank you. Moving forward, we have item number 2, case 24013, the Waller Irrigation Pond approval request recommendation. A request by applicant Todd Waller for pond approval request recommendation to construct 1 5-acre agricultural irrigation pond across portions of the following parcels, which have a combined total area of plus or minus 33.50 acres and are zoned AG, agricultural and estates. The site is located at 47990 Martz Road and 48196 Martz Road on parcels as V12583125990012000 and V12583125990015701. First off, presentation by Township staff. Director Akers.
Thank you, Commissioner Cullen. So for this presentation, there's 3 things I want to talk about. The first thing I want to talk about is kind of the history of the application to kind of explain when it was applied and kind of some of the things we did. Second thing I want to talk about is kind of an overview of the approval process and some of the notes based on some of the questions that we had been asked from the board meeting, because this had been before the board a few times. And then the last thing I wanted to do is kind of go through my staff report for the irrigation pond review under our ordinance. So I apologize that this is going to take a little bit of time, but I want to make sure the Planning Commission has the full picture of the story. So township staff received an app. So Mr. Waller had previously applied for pond permits at Hull and Sumter Road and had been granted approval in 2021, I believe, to dig those ponds on Hull and Sumter Road. So he had submitted an application and plans to the township back in, I think it was May or June of this year. So originally, when Director Power and I were looking at it, because of the amount of material that was coming out of the ponds, and looking at the zoning ordinance, we had initially looked at it and, classified it under the excavation and mining provisions, which are in our zoning code. So we had discussions with Mr. Waller going back and forth. Eventually the township's attorney were involved, and at that point we were advised that the process that we're following this evening was the correct process to handle by township's legal counsel. So couple notes that I wanted to provide, which kind of give some idea what the approval process is. So the applicant had provided an affidavit from a farmer on the property who leases the property, that indicating that they are actively farming that parcel, and I believe there was another adjacent parcel they're farming as well. The property is currently zoned AG agricultural, which allows agriculture as a permitted use. The township does allow the constructions of pond on agricultural property, where agricultural ponds would be accessory to the agricultural use. The township has 2 general ordinances which apply to excavations as well as mining and ponds. And due to this, the applicant will need to meet those standards from both of those general ordinances, which there's reviews for both of them in the packet. The township board for the excavation and mining permits, the township board is the necessary entity who approves those excavation permits. And based on our pond ordinance, the township planning commission reviews and approves those pond permits. Each has separate standards, and at this time, the planning commission is being asked to consider the irrigation or the pond portion of the approval. And as I said, I'll go through the standards in my staff report. So on the excavation permit, I know we had asked, so there's several conditions on the pond approval as well. There's also some conditions on the pond permit that we requested, which include, the approval of the excavation permit from the township board, limiting, and on the excavation permit, we included limiting the hours of operation of those required by our noise ordinance and obtaining the permit from the township board and some restoration items as well. The applicant is expected to comply with these conditions. The township has the ability under our codes to pursue enforcement actions if they do not. The applicant will also likely be required to obtain a soil erosion permit from Wayne County for the activity. And as part of the site plan that was submitted, the applicant has proposed several soil erosion measures, including a mud mat off of Martz Road when the trucks come in and out. And then there's silt fencing around the irrigation pond and around the area where they're going to stockpile soil. So as I had indicated before, we've consulted with our township attorney on the project to make sure that we are following the correct procedure with regards to how our ordinances, and based on that consultation, this is the proper procedure. These ordinances haven't been reviewed or updated in several years, and of course in 2025 we're going to be reviewing these ordinances to update them to provide some further protections for our residents, clarify certain requirements, but that shouldn't affect this application. So based on the review, essentially it appears that the applicant has met the standards, and I'll go through my review letter at this time. So the applicant proposes to dig a roughly 4.8 acre pond for irrigating crops and relocating excavated materials off-site. Under a separate process and review, which is attached, the Board of Trustees is going to be reviewing the application for removal of soils from the site as part of the construction of the pond. Some irrigation activities are authorized under the Michigan's Right to Farm Act. However, local ordinances which address requirements for irrigation ponds and excavation activities still apply. Irrigation ponds are subject to a construction permit and review by the Planning Commission, which is what we're doing right now. And the purpose of the report is to request the Planning Commission to consider granting a permit for the pond. The analysis that's in there is based on Article 4 of Chapter 42 of the Township Code of Ordinances. And as always in my letter, any underlying comments are comments that need to be addressed as a condition of approval. So the application was submitted, which was assigned by the owner, Todd Waller. So we did take a look at our assessing database and reviewed the property ownership records. Excuse me. It shows that the property is owned by Todd Waller, and there's another named individual named Kenny Farmer who owns the property. So in order to proceed, Mr. Farmer will need either submit a letter indicating they agree with the proposed work, or they will need to sign the permit application. The applicant has submitted a site plan for the project. The plan shows a 60-foot wide band around the irrigation pond, which is not labeled, but it's placed 50 feet from the east side property line. So on the plan, we're going to ask that the applicant provide some clarification if the 60-foot band is part of the irrigation pond or not, and so in which case the pond size or slope may need to be adjusted to comply with the required setback. The plan does include topographic information with the pond. It indicates that on sheet 2 that 93,300 cubic yards of material are proposed to be excavated from the pond. The total area of excavation of 217,800 square feet, and the average depth of the pond, per the notes, will be 15 feet with a 1-on-4 slope. There are statements in the plan which include general notes, I apologize, which include compliance with ordinance standards, including statements that material not be excavated in a manner that runoff, overflow, spillage, or seepage encroaches on the property, and that they're going to have warning devices and life safety devices be provided in compliance with that specific section of our ordinance which requires it. Because the activity in question involves a one-time excavation pursuant to providing an irrigation pond for agricultural crops, it's not considered mining. However, the removal of spoils off-site does require that excavation permit to be issued by the Township Board of Trustees under 42-216. Board of Trustees is therefore being requested separately to consider the issuance of the excavation permit. A note verifying that the soil will not be removed from the ponds except in accordance with that has been added to the plan. And the consistent with the requirements of 42-213 of the code, the Planning Commission may require hydrological survey to provide evidence of any potential adverse impacts. So we are asking that the applicant provide some information regarding drainage design. The pond water level is shown at 684 elevation above sea level, with the ground level at an elevation of 687, resulting in a pond with 12 feet of standing water. Information regarding what happens when the pond fills up with water, how the water would be discharged, et cetera. We're asking that that be provided to ensure it won't result in any flooding should the pond overfill. Fencing for the pond is addressed in the excavation permit. It's a standard that needs to be considered by the Township Board of Trustees. As this is a concern that has been brought up, the Planning Commission reviews as part of their normal, and as part of detention ponds and stormwater ponds, fencing is something that the Planning Commission does typically review as part of their normal duties. We're recommending that a comment be made to the Township Board about this topic. So the pond is located immediately adjacent to several residential properties with homes to the southwest and east. So due to this, the Planning Commission should recommend to the board that the applicant construct a 48-inch to 72-inch, which is compliant with the standards of the agricultural district, fence along these pond areas which are adjacent to the residential properties. And then we recommend the fencing can be a material that's compliant with the allowable materials in the AG district. So based on that analysis, we're offering the following recommended conditions of the submitted application site plan for consideration of the irrigation pond permit approval by the Planning Commission. I know we've specified them, but we'll go through them one more time. So compliance with a 60-foot setback requirement from the east and southwest side lot lines. The applicant must obtain approval from the Township Board of Trustees for an excavation permit and meet all design requirements for the excavation permit prior to commencement of construction. The applicant shall have the other owner of record, Kenny Farmer, sign the permit application or submit a letter indicating that they are authorizing a scope of work. Prior to project closeout, the use of the irrigation pond and engineer's certification letter shall be provided. This letter shall state that the pond poses no negative downstream drainage impacts, which references adjacent land, elevation data, and as-built elevation data for the pond's freeboard, lowest top of bank, and bottom elevations as necessary. The proposed pond shall not detrimentally impact the surface or groundwaters of the subject property or other nearby properties. No excavation may be performed in such a manner that runoff, overflow, spillage, or seepage encroaches on property owned by another person. The pond shall not detrimentally impact aqueous or subaqueous areas of the applicant's property or adjoining properties. Any required soil erosion permit from Wayne County DPS shall be obtained prior to commencement of construction. The applicant has to provide an estimated completion time of the total project, and that the Planning Commission recommends that the excavation permit include the construction of a 48-inch to 72-inch fence during the southeast and west portions of the pond that abut adjacent residential properties. So based on that, that is our staff review letter. I am happy to answer any questions that the Planning Commission may have.
Thank you. And do we have the applicant?
Good evening. Todd Waller's my name. Any questions that I can answer for you? I didn't have a presentation. to present to you today. But is there any questions that you, or concerns that you have?
Okay, Commissioner?
Chair?
Yes.
Hi, I'd like to just know where the owner, the second owner on this, Kenny Farmer, is he part of, your organization and what you're doing?
Correct.
Can you tell us more about his involvement?
Him and I own the house together. We farm the property. We're eventually gonna plant sod there, which was gonna require more water than the average field would require. And it's not the typical sod that grows at the DeBach Sod Farm. It's a special sod for golf courses.
Oh, excellent.
So
Okay.
it was, I would have done that before, but we put crops in it now so that we could utilize the property until we got this approved.
Okay.
I just done the same job for a farmer on Hull Road, which tried to set the platform for Van Buren Township for irrigation ponds because they didn't have one.
So you built an irrigation pond there?
Irrigation pond on Hull Road in 2021, I think it was. Yeah, 21. I was gonna dig two, but the farmer decided he only needed one. So we got the application, we finished the job, had no issues. And we moved right around the corner to do the same thing. So to answer the question, I guess for people that have any concerns that doesn't have any idea how groundwater works, the best way, the explanation to you is you take a cup of beer. You pour the beer in the glass and you get a big foam on top of it, right? All you're doing when you remove the material to expose the dirt, or remove the dirt to expose the water, or the foam, if you will, you pull the dirt off, there's your water. There's your water. It's not gonna come gushing out of the ground like an oil well or, you know what I mean? It's not. The water level is gonna set at the water table. So if your yard is flooding now, it's still gonna flood. Only thing would help is that once there's a lower area for the water to run into, the neighbor's property is more likely gonna run into my place, which I don't have an issue with, and it's not gonna create a big soil erosion, but it would possibly help the neighbors who are having some flooding issues, if they are, I'm not saying that they are, but if they're having some flooding issues, it could help in that manner. But it's not gonna crest, and it's not gonna flood anyone else's property. And it's strictly used for irrigation. It's, they don't want, a lot of the neighbors don't want development over there. They don't want new homes. They want to keep it rural, right? This is another way to keep it that way.
Yeah, good point.
So,
Good point.
it's hard, to farm the place. And it's been dry the last couple of years, you guys here. And, you're growing a costly crop like the sod that we're planning to put down. You have to irrigate it. So, and you can't keep the material on the property. So I'm gonna dig this hole and I got 96,000 cubic yards of material. Now I got a mountain of material. It's cutting back on my crops. You're not supposed to stockpile that much material on your property anyway. It has to be removed, the spoils. So I'm not running a mining outfit. I'm running a farm.
How long have you been growing sod?
I was gonna do it last year, but this has been the first year. This is the first year of me doing this.
Golf course sod this last
So I had a
season?
customer of mine that I did work for, that's what he done. And he said it's a good lucrative business to get into. It's a good farm to get into. It keeps the neighborhood look nice, the mosquitoes are down, weeds are down, it looks good. And you make good money with it. Not many people do it. So I said, okay, I'd like to try to get into it. I have property. I own 40 acres in the neighboring township, another 100 acres in the Sumter Township, and I own the 35 or 37 acres, whatever this property is. I'm not making them all side farms, but I'm in the business, I farm, so.
Nice, nice.
But that's strictly what it's for.
Nice.
Any other questions I can help clear up for you?
Commissioners?
Far as the trucking goes, if that's gonna be an issue, we're gonna come down March Road to Laurel Road to Bemis. When I did this before, we came down Hall Road and went to, we come down Hall Road to Sumter, took Sumter to Bemis, and we either went out Haggerty Road or Rossonville. We diverted the trucks so that it wasn't a pain in the ass, for lack of a better word, for the neighbors to hear trucks beating up and down the road. So we diverted some in different areas to cut down on the sound. We only work from 7 o'clock until 5 o'clock during the summer. In the winter months, when the days are shorter, we cut it back to 3 o'clock in the afternoon, from 7 to 3. So we stay within the noise ordinance, so we're not disturbing our neighbors.
Thank you for that. Thank you for that consideration.
And that's 5 days a week, maybe half a day on Saturday. But once we get started with the project, the digging process will be quick. It's just a removal of because you don't want to bombard the neighborhood with trucks. So it'll be the removal of the material is going to take a little longer.
So, Mr. Whaler, I have another question. You saw the requirements that were proposed in this letter?
I didn't get to look at all of them, but I heard, I'm going to look at them here in a little while.
Okay. I was just going to ask if you had any concerns or issues with the recommendations that Mr. Akers has made in the letter.
I guess if the way I do a lot of things is look at past is if the same recommendations are in what we just done. I mean, like I say, I had to set the precedent for the ordinance for irrigation ponds in the first place. Van Buren didn't have one until I did. So that's why I didn't figure it should take such a long process to do this, you know. They set up an irrigation ordinance because of me. So now I'm just here to do the same job again. Like I said, I didn't have any issues before. So I don't see why it's such a pain this go around. I guess the questions need to be answered for the people. I don't have them. I don't mind doing so.
Okay, great, thank you.
Through the chair.
Commissioner, or Treasurer Bud?
Mr. Clock, who wrote one of the letters saying that he had soybeans on the property, because I know you've only owned the property for about a year.
Correct.
He had soybeans on it. He probably knows he isn't going to do it because you're going to do the sod. So I don't know why he is requesting the pond, why you aren't requesting the pond yourself, why you've involved him, because he's not going to farm.
Well, not to cut you off, but he's farming the place now.
Right, but he won't be doing it next year if you're going to dig the ponds and put the sod in.
With everything that was going on, I wasn't for sure that he was going to be able to. I wasn't for sure that I'd be able to put my crop in that I wanted to I know I can't do it now this year. So he's going to continue to farm the winter wheat that he's planted, and then he'll probably put another crop in, a late crop in, after he picks his winter wheat. So what happened was the process went so long. We're in the winter time now. I won't be able to have my job done and have everything graded and cleaned up the way it needs to be to get my crop in to yield with sod. It would have happened this year if I was able to start last year when we did the process.
My next question is, there's no barns or anything on the property.
That's good. I don't need the room.
I know, but where are you going to store all the irrigation equipment as to what kind of irrigation is going to take it from the pond to the field?
So all it takes is there's a well, like a little small well house or shed. It's nothing of any size. You don't even have to have the shed over. It's a pump with a pump box. And then they have irrigation that runs just like you do your sprinklers in your yard. Just little tubes that run, you fire up the pump, waters the grass, set back down. Okay. That's on the sod side. When we're doing what John's doing now, they have a water tractor. So it hooks up. You ever see those big things, they spread right out and there's a big sprinkler? Same concept. So I don't know I don't know now this year if I'm gonna even put the sod in well, I know I can't do it this year because I don't have the way to water it, so I'll waste all that money trying to get it ready.
And I also know that you didn't come to the board meeting, so the board has not approved you to dig the ponds and to remove the soil for right now.
Right. So I missed the pond, I missed that meeting because I thought that meeting was this one we're in today.
Mr. Waller, I also know you're the supervisor at
Yes,
Augusta
ma'am.
Township.
Yeah.
And I think you could easily found out for sure when the meeting was, because I know you were told that you needed to be
Well,
at the meeting.
I'm told a million different things.
right.
I run a trucking company. I'll do land development, a bulk storage. I'm the
Okay.
supervisor of the township. I take care of an elderly mother. I do a lot of things, so it's common to slip one thing to slip a feller's mind.
So because of that, the township, our township board did not act. So it would be my recommendation, rather than take any more to my board to have to approve, I make a motion that we postpone this until you get the item cleared up with the township board.
Which item are we gonna clear up then?
I'm sorry,
What is it that we need to clear up?
we have to go to the township board. They had questions that they wanted answered, and you were supposed to be there.
Okay, and the next meeting is January 11th, correct?
Believe it's January 21st.
Oh, you guys gotta remember now.
I think it's January 21st.
The
I can-
21st.
Yeah,
So
I
that's
can
what I'm
verify
saying.
it
My
for you.
dates I was supposed to go there. I can't, I missed the meeting. So I didn't remember.
So they postponed it, so they didn't do any action. So that's my motion for.
That's
this board.
that's fine. So what we'll do, we'll go to the township and then we'll come back here again and do this all over again.
Yes.
Or will we accept our part of this now and then go over there? Or you can't do one without the other?
That would not be my recommendation. I think you get settled with the board first, then we'll come back and take care of this.
Very good.
Discussion of that motion? Or is there support for it?
I haven't heard support yet, but there's a motion on to
Or
postpone
are we
this.
just in regular discussion?
Well, regarding regular discussion, I guess I didn't know about a meeting that he didn't attend. Usually, we make like a recommendation to the board, and now the board is gonna make a recommendation to us.
We took it to the board,
Mhm.
and he was supposed to be there to answer questions,
Okay.
and he didn't come, so the township board postponed it. So my motion is that rather than put more things on the board to have to approve, he clears up that item with the board, and then we look at this and it can move
So
forward.
he came before the planning commission before?
No, this is
Just
the first
today.
time he was at the planning commission.
Mr. Chairman, if I understand it correctly, there's an issue with this skirting the definition of being a mining operation due to the amount of mineral dirt being removed from the property that the township board has to assess and approve before he'll be allowed to do any excavation. Our point on the planning commission is to make sure that if he's allowed to build a pond of the size, and remove the material from the site, that the design of the pond meets our standards, fencing and zoning, and can you have it that close to the neighboring properties? We're here to make sure that the pond respects the right of the property owner and of the neighbors.
Right.
That's what but we can't really do it unless the township board says, yes, you can go ahead and remove all of that
You
material
can't remove
anyway.
anything till he clears it through the township board.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I guess I'm confused just because of the action items here. Item E. That we're.
Because it's a pond approval, I'm sorry, Mr. Chair, I didn't mean to.
Go for
if
it.
I could-
Go for
It's
it.
because it's a pond approval, is that we don't do a lot of pond approvals. Usually we do site plan approvals like we just did, or ordinance recommendations. This is totally different. This is like it's
so how-
specifically a pond approval request.
I just want to ask, how did this end up on the agenda then?
Township board meeting.
Last week.
It was last week. So it would have been on the agenda because
I guess I'm just confused, so forgive me.
No problem. We'll clear.
I think I have, similar confusion. I guess my question is, why did they start the process with the board instead of the planning commission? Is it because they need to clarify if it's a mining operation first? If it wasn't at this scale, it would have started with us as normal? Is that correct?
Director Akers?
They're two separate ordinances, and they do, for these type of approvals, they do kind of work in tandem. However, the order is up to the planning board, how they want to approve it and proceed. So the planning board, wants the township board to make the determination that, they can, basically excavate and remove the materials off-site before they approve the pond. That's perfectly within the purview of the planning commission. But they are two separate ordinances. And so, they have different standards and they're tied together, but there's not a set order as to how they need to be considered like a special land use approval. It's not a recommendation. It's the planning commission has a certain scope of authorities and the township board has a certain scope of authority. And the planning commission is more with regards to pond design and the way the pond's set up, and the township board is for those basically authorizing the removal of materials off-site.
And to kind of tell you about how long, I've been working with this for, I think it's been over a year now that I've been trying to get this taken care of. Over a year. I missed a meeting that I didn't realize I had, okay? But I've been dealing with this for over a year.
Mr. Chairman, could I have a question for staff?
Sure. Commissioner Jarrett?
Director Akers, do you know how old our pond ordinance is?
I don't. I think there's a date. I'd have to go look on Municode. It's been in place for a
Quite
while, I believe.
At least 7 or 8 years, right?
Probably longer than
Probably,
that.
because I don't remember sitting here and recommending a change to it. So, okay. My comments on the considering it as a pond approval, I would want to know what other structures are being installed on this pond. If you're going to be building a wellhead or a drainage pipe down to the bottom of the pond, you said, how's it going to be irrigated? There will be a shed and a pump. It would be nice if the plan called out where the shed was.
That's just one. I have a pump. I have a pump that you pull
You
behind
have a pump
your
on it.
tractor.
You have a pump on the back of a tractor,
and
and
then
you
you
have a
sit
flat
there.
hose that you roll into the pond.
Exactly. So there's several ways to do that, but right now I have a pump that you pull right up to the.
My concern, Mr. Chairman, is with the noise aspect. If it was a permanent wellhead addition, I'd want to know which residential property it was being installed next to, since there are, even agricultural parcels have noise requirements that have to be checked. So I'd be, interested in seeing that. But my general comment is that I feel like the request comes with an awful lot of missing information. Our staff has, 12 different points, including the other owner of the property not having signed the application, and the township board not having given their given their approval about the materials removal. I feel like it's a little premature for us to act on this. I would be in favor of the applicant also addressing some of these points and bringing it back to us after such time as he's been to the township board. On the surface of it, it looks like a pond. It's a very large pond, which is also cause for concern.
Correct. And I just done the same job. I just done this job.
It would have been good to have that called out. If there's another pond that you just did somewhere in the township, it would have been good as an example to know that. I don't have it in front of me now. You didn't present it to us, so I understand it's at Hull Road.
Hull Road and Sumter, Hall and Sumter. Actually, you spoke upon it. They just spoke upon it.
I understand.
I remember seeing those two ponds in front of us.
And if it's a very similar pond and it's the same in size and it's the same percentage coverage of the acreage, that would have been a lot more, that would have been very good information to know.
Well, I trust me, I spent like $14,000 providing that information to you guys. That's the issue I have here,
I'm in support of tabling until such time as the township board addresses I support your motion.
So is that an official motion in the books?
Procedurally?
Procedurally. Direct,
Still in discussion, I guess, I don't know.
Director Akers?
I'm sorry, through the chair,
Yes.
Director Akers, I see that, the surrounding addresses have been notified. Did you get any response from those?
Yes, so we received two, so hang on, let me answer the first question. So the first question is, there was a motion made and it was supported. There was discussion in between, but I still think it's a valid motion, because there's a motion on the table, it was discussed, it's been supported, so I think it's valid. So procedurally, I think we're at discussion, and
Okay.
if the commission wants to vote, you can vote. The second question is, yes, we did receive two items of comment. One, and I'm gonna have to look at the email. There was one from an adjacent neighbor who wrote in support of the project. Hang on, let me pull up my sent email. If everybody will bear with me for just 1 second. Oh, that's not the right one. So there was one from the Miss Shelley Compton. They had indicated they live next door at 48240 Martz Road for 14 years. They had concern about heavy rain, but they did indicate that they approved Mr. Waller to construct an irrigation pond, which they believed would bring relief to their neighbors for flooding. And then there was one other comment from and I'm gonna have to find this one. I apologize, I don't have it right in front of me, but it was from a Mr. Rodney Taylor expressing concern about the project. Hang on. I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time looking through it. It was a comment from Mr. Rodney Taylor, who had expressed concern about the applicant pursuing mining activities, and he had shared, and I had emailed it to the Planning Commission, but he had shared information regarding some FOIAs that he had obtained from the Washtenaw County Water Resources Department, which handles their soil erosion sedimentation control permitting, about some enforcement actions they had against Mr. Waller and some activities, and I forget what municipality they were in, but it was in Washtenaw County. So those were the two comments that we received for the project.
Okay, any other discussion? We do have a motion and support in front of us. Seeing none, I'll make a roll call vote, please.
Jackson Paul,
Yes.
Medina Atchison, Peter Creel,
Yes.
Sherry Budd, Jeff Jar, Brian Cullen.
Yes. So we have moved to postpone until he has been in front of the Van Buren Township Board.
Can you send me an email or what?
I'll send you an email. So the next township board meeting where this will be addressed is Tuesday, January 21st at 6. And then, of course, depending on how that goes, if it gets approved, it'll be back before the Planning Commission on Wednesday, February 12th at 5:30.
So the January 11th, what is that?
I don't believe we have any meetings scheduled January 11th. Yes, so it will be January 21st. So I will verify all those. I'll make sure I email them to you, Mr. Waller.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
I'm sorry, what date did you say in January?
21st.
21st.
Because the other one would be the 7th, the first Tuesday would be the 7th.
Now, with that, so like you had stated, I'm the supervisor at Augusta Township, so we also have our meetings on Tuesday. I have to check, see what day that's on. So they don't overrun, our meetings don't overrun with each other.
Yeah, Well, I can tell you, have a calendar that the 21st is a Tuesday.
That'll be the planning commission meeting.
So that's
So
what
you-
comes
Planning
in.
Commission is the 22nd.
Yeah.
21st will be at 6 PM. And then
Yeah.
the planning commission meeting will be at 5:30 PM.
If my township meetings is on the same day, then obviously I can't job at the township. So, I'll contact you this week or,
Yeah.
probably next week,
We can,
figure out our days. Is there any way we have hold a special meeting over this?
I looked up Augusta's meeting. It looks like you guys meet on the fourth Tuesday of every month. So in
Be
January.
the 21st then, same day.
The 4th is the 28th.
7th. Or, yeah, the 27th, the Monday. 28th would be the Tuesday.
Yeah.
Good then. All righty. Thank you very much. If you have any more questions.
Mr. Waller.
Okay, moving ahead. Item number 3, Housing and Zoning Implementation Plan Workshop number 1. Presentation, we have
Bear with me one second. I will get this file booted up for Mr. Donovan Smith of McKenna Associates, and we'll get rocking and rolling.
Right.
Yeah.
I think the lady here.
Yes? I believe so. You will re-notify the neighbors, won't you, Mr. Akers, of the meeting coming forth, when he will appear before us again?
You know, I'm not sure if I have to send out another notification. I believe I do, but what you do, if you leave me your name and your information, I'll make sure I let you know. But I have to double check on the code because I'm not familiar with the procedures with the pond off the top of my head. But yeah, leave me your contact information and I will make sure you're included on all those communications. Normally for public hearings, once they conduct the public hearings, there isn't an additional notification that's required, but this is a different ordinance, so I have to double check. I apologize. But either way, if anybody requests that they be notified of a meeting ahead of time, I will make sure it happens, so. I'll get you a piece of paper once I get this booted up, so thank you. Yeah, here. You got a HDMI port? It's cool. This worked out great. This one's got a bunch of music on it, so.
Yeah, yeah.
I'll set this one down here. I'll let you go.
Ma'am,
Ask her to come up to Tina.
could you come up to Tina, please?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Danny Wilkins was here when he did those ones. It might have been Danny
Oh, yeah,
Wilkins.
she needed a,
He did not own that property unless he just.
it was
It has the same symptoms that we all do.
a point of privilege needed, needed to see.
That's Belva Overraid. This is. We're on right now.
We're on the Housing Zoning Implementation Plan Workshop. As soon as the presentation's ready to go.
I do not believe he's doing what we have on.
Okay, here we are.
I
Yeah,
would be shocked.
housing readiness, I think, isn't it?
You should have, just for context, you should have 2 documents, 2 memos. One that has a market analysis and the other that has some analysis of existing studies and documents.
Housing supply analysis
Yes.
Okay.
We ready?
I think we are. Moving ahead, item number 3, Housing and Zoning Implementation Plan. And I believe we have with us to present Donovan Smith, Principal Planner from McKenna. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for
You
having
have the
me.
floor, sir.
Thank you. Thank you for having me this evening. So what I provided with you in your packets is some leisure late night reading material. If you don't get sleepy here and you need some further assistance, I'll give some context and background to it, but I won't be walking through it. But I'll just give you some more background and context to it, as well as providing just some reinforcement of what we're doing and kind of our task and what our charges are. I'll go through some of the content that we've discovered and give some direction on next steps. And then I'll kind of give an opportunity at the end if you have any questions or comments on anything I've presented in your packet or anything you hear me present on the screen. So going forward, just again, reinforcement, the township of Van Buren was awarded $45,000 to update or implement their master plan and make improvements to their housing supply, stock, and quality. And this is all a result of the MISHDA Housing Readiness Incentive Grant. So that's kind of why we're here, and they're kind of funding this project. So the purpose that we submitted with that grant was to, one, continue with engagement in redevelopment-ready communities. So where we can, we are trying to make sure we hit any marks within that program, in addition to meeting the requirements of the grant, as well as implementing the goals and objectives that were previously adopted in your most recent version of your master plan. And then the ultimate objective is to develop a comprehensive housing strategy for improvements to the zoning ordinance. And then we're going to give some models on what that can look like and how we can implement those changes to allow these types of projects that support the housing strategy. I did present this before, so just again, contextual background. The aspects of this project that we've been working on thus far is studying the existing land uses, your existing master plans, and other historical documents that were adopted by the township, as well as conducting a market research and analysis. And those are both the memos you have in front of you today. So you have a memo that just gives a brief overview of your master plan, zoning ordinance, and some other documents, and the related housing goals and objectives that we're bringing forward and implementing. And then the second document is the actual market research that again went into some of the economic, housing, and social demographic qualities of the township. And we use that to further assess just the types of improvements, and it gives us context and background to some of the zoning implementations we'll bring forward. And then in the new year, you'll see us, and I'll give some more background to that later, we'll be developing the missing middle housing plan, as well as bringing you some draft recommendations and changes to your zoning ordinance towards the early middle part of the second quarter of 2025. So timeline, just again, more background. This is December 11th, so we were anticipated to be here last month. We had just pushed it back 1 month, but we're still on schedule. You can anticipate us again in the new year. I think that January date's going to be adjusted into February. So I think it'll be February when you'll see us that'd be the third time. And then we'll be actually sharing with you the concepts of middle housing development as they've been applied to some of the subject properties. And then so you can start to actually see what these projects can look like and then provide feedback. And then we'll take that and start to craft ordinances. So based on our engagement with your existing documents and our market study, we did come up with some program objectives. So these are the kind of guiding points as we start to craft those model languages, as well as the concepts. These are kind of the things that we're going to be trying to make sure we accomplish in that process. One, we want to make sure that the concepts provide adequate housing supply for new and existing residents that reflect development trends. We want to provide housing which allows residents to age in place. Van Buren Township is an aging community, and we want to make sure that the housing that we bring forward can support those residents as well as the residents that follow them. We want to cultivate vibrant neighborhoods with a mix of uses, sense of community, and high standards of design. Develop additional zoning districts or regulations to accommodate compatible housing within and or near commercial areas. That speaks more closely to like that final recommendation. Will that be a overlay? Will that be a new district? Will that be just improved regulations? That's going to be some of the next things we accomplish. And then lastly, align the objectives with the State of Michigan Housing Plan where applicable. And I'll go into some of those details here. So as I mentioned, the State of Michigan released in early 23 the statewide Michigan Housing Plan. And what I included in your packet is they have a large array of various strategies that communities can adopt to help implement these housing strategies. We are using those to help guide this process, but what I provided to you in your packet is, I think it's on the second or third page of that memo, there is a long list of all the housing strategies and the categories. So that includes housing stock, adult, older housing, home ownership, communication and education, equity and racial justice, housing ecosystem, and preventing and ending homelessness. And there's probably maybe 80 or so, 80 plus recommendations. What we attempted to do was we went through those and we called out those strategies that we think are most applicable to the township. So if you ever get a chance, you can look at those. The dark ones are the ones we think apply. The ones that are kind of grayed out, we just don't think those specifically apply to this situation. But if you say, hey, Donovan, we think item 4.2 is relevant, I'll just include it. And then again, we just use that as further context to make sure that we're hitting the marks and that we're implementing zoning that, again, meets the goals of the township, but also aligns with some of the greater goals and objectives of the state. So we also provided a residential and commercial market analysis. So that is included in your packet. It's mostly residential, but it does have some economic and commercial factors. But we did include things like home value, medium income, housing stock, occupancy, population, as well as income, housing tenure, age of housing and population, gross rent, and then cost burden. So some of those are in your packet with some narratives, and then I'll kind of go through some of the highlighting points that we identified. So the first one I want to share with you is the age of residents here in the township. As I mentioned, the township is an aging population. And I just want to make a point to the right. This bracket, which is your age 20 to 34, that is kind of your new emerging segment of your population. Over the past, let's see, I think it's 2010 to 2022, that population has increased, which is very good. The second aspect of this chart is your population between 50 and 79. This is getting close to your senior population, and that population is actually growing pretty quickly. Over the past 12 years or so, based on this chart, and it actually cut off, it's probably increased, let me make sure I get the number right, about 2,000. It says 4,000 here. I apologize, it was cut off. But you've probably had a pickup of about maybe 1,500 to 2,000 seniors in the past maybe 5 or so years, 5 to 10 years. So we want to make sure that whatever housing implementation we bring forward, it's taking that into consideration, that the township is aging, and we want to make sure that we can provide housing that supports that population. In addition to that new generation of residents between 20 and 34, making sure that the housing options can also support new families, small families, large, but also single parent households and things of that nature. The homes, the typology of homes in the township are primarily the renters, typically 51% occupy large scale apartment centers or multifamily centers. More than 50% of your renters in this community, they are located in those areas. And then a smaller portion are found in your single family and then your kind of early middle housing categories, those 2 to 9 unit. You have very few comparative residents that live in extremely large 50-plus unit buildings. I don't think you have many. You can correct me, I may be wrong, but there aren't a small portion of your population is there, as well as other, and that could include like mobile homes or other living situations unique that are not specifically single-family or multifamily units. But most of your renters do live in those complexes or developments that have between 10 to 50 units. This chart we found in particularly interesting. This is a share of homes that are vacant and available over time. And this ranges from 2012, where you had about 5% of your housing stock that was vacant and also available, where you are in 2022, where you are somewhere around 2.3%. And it's a good and a bad thing. On the good hand, most of your housing stock is occupied. You have about 2 or 3% that is not occupied. The challenge or the other side to that is you are starting to approach your kind of your limit in terms of space that you have available and how much of it is being used. So what that kind of gap between that 2.5% and the bottom shows is that there's a demand, because you had this occupancy gap of 5%, you filled it with 2.5, there's 2.5 left, but there's still space. There was enough interest over the past 12 years to fill that gap, and now that gap is almost filled. So that usually gives you indication that there is a demand for housing in your community, and you're successfully filling and meeting that demand. The state of Michigan, one of their metrics for, I think their target is 61,000 building permits. And they kind of calculate that number to 1-to-1 to a home. So one of the things they want to see is 60,000 in new construction homes. So one of the things that the township can track and that we observed is how many building permits you are issuing related to housing as well as other development projects. And from 2020 to 2022, you had a slight decrease in the amount of permits, but they were mostly associated with single-family homes. And then it was in 22 where you received a spike, where you got, let's see, that's about maybe 20 or 30 building permits, and that could be if you have like a subdivision that has multiple homes or condos or things like that, those can have their own building permits. But the good thing is that over the past kind of year or 2 years, you had a building permits, which is a good sign. Again, that indicates there is a demand for housing in your area because people are willing to come in and spend money and pull these permits. Home ownership by ethnicity is pretty normal. Your black and white populations are pretty average in terms of home ownership rate. You do have quite a large decrease in your Hispanic, Asian, and other populations in terms of home ownership. So that's just an observation point. Of your homes in the township, most of them are 2 and 3 bedrooms, which is interesting to know because the housing and family size across the country, but Michigan and the township is decreasing. So at one point, households that had 3+ bedrooms probably more closely fit to family sizes in previous years and decades. But over time, that number is slowly decreasing. I think that might be in your packet, it may not. But that number is slowly decreasing. So it's just good to also be aware and know that the bulk of your homes in the township are 2 and 3 bedroom homes. So it's kind of up to the market if that becomes the kind of desired home that families in the future are looking for, but it's good to know.
Can I interrupt 1 minute with that statement? I know that that's what's happening here, but the thing that's fascinating is population is getting older. They're building all 2-story homes. They want small lots, and they can't put a ranch on it.
Yes.
So it leaves, I think we have a gap for people let's say my age. If I bought a home, I don't want to climb stairs anymore. I'm done with stairs. But I can't find a home.
I would agree 100%. There is a gap based on what I've seen in senior housing.
Yep.
But
not just a senior complex. We are getting, a couple of them. That's fine. But if a senior and their mate wanted a house,
yeah, just a regular like ranch style home.
with 2 bedrooms, maybe 2 bathrooms, no stairs,
Yeah, they
ain't
are a
gonna find
challenge.
it. Did you find one? Yep. Open concept, 1,800 square feet. Yep. That's what I got, and I got 2 stories, and it's more steps than I want. Yep. And my kids are grown. Yep.
And my mother was 3 of us, so we're all gone, and she has a 4-bedroom house all to herself too. So and you can see that here, that the homes that were built were 3 to 4 bedroom homes, and over time, families get smaller, families move out, and now what are we doing with these large homes, and how do you attract residents that need those kinds of spaces? Which is why we included in our objectives to provide housing that will allow seniors to age in place, because we identified that gap.
Just say no stairs.
No stairs. Pro ranch. When we look at home ownership, I think this is also an interesting chart, because what we see is that where we are today, Wayne County, which was the county the study compared this to, but Anne Van Buren Charter Township, we're kind of at the same place in terms of home ownership. When you look at how much of your population are homeowners versus renters, you're kind of at par with the county, which is pretty good. So you're looking at about a 64, 64-36 split between your rental and home ownership populations.
Chairman? On that previous graph, what's the scale? What's that top percentage and what's that bottom percentage there on the left? Can't read it.
60 is about 60, yeah, between 66 and 67.
Okay, so that's not 0 to 100, that's
No,
62
no.
to 66. Oh, they are right on par. Thanks.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yep.
Sorry, I couldn't read it. I need the glasses too.
When we look at median rent over time, we all hear that rent is increasing, and it is, and it has been continually increasing since about 2012. However, Van Buren has kind of been outpacing just the natural median rent level. Again, it's compared to Wayne County, but it does show that rent and the cost of rent is continually to increase as we go forward.
Yes.
Real quick, can you go back? Do you know if that's indexed to inflation?
I do not believe this is indexed on inflation. And just some context, if you ever want to go back and look at this data, if you Google MISHDA Community Data Portal, you can type in Van Buren, and everything I'm presenting to you is there, with kind of some details and narratives. Some of them actually may reference if it's adjusted by inflation or not. So just some background, and you can also look at SIMCOG's community profile as well. Between those 2 locations, you can get a lot of data on your community. So like the population and stuff in the beginning, that came from SIMCOG. A lot of this stuff is coming from MISHDA. Okay. And there are a few slides here, again, because we identified that gap in senior housing. We brought up a share of populations that experience cost burden. Cost burden is when you spend more than 30% of your income on housing. So easy numbers, if you make $100,000 a year and you are spending $30,000 on rent, mortgage, utilities, maintenance, repairs, you are considered a cost burden if you're exceeding that 30% number, okay? So what this chart shows is seniors that are renting, and we looked earlier, and most renters are taking place between those 2 and 10 unit properties. Between those seniors that are renting their housing, about 60% of those seniors experience cost burden, which means they're spending more than 30% of their income on renting. When you look at renters across the entire community, that number is less. So you have less non-senior residents that are spending less on housing. So seniors are just spending more. Again, fixed incomes, increasing rents, that's kind of what's pushing that. When we look at seniors who are homeowners and cost burden, that number goes down, but the discrepancy still exists. It went from, I think, 60 to 30% of seniors who are homeowners experience cost burden. Across the entire township, you have a little less than 20. So again, seniors are greatly impacted in terms of affordability and housing options here in the township. So that's kind of just some brief numbers, just for context. Again, there's a lot more that I didn't present in your packets, but if you have any questions, I can give you any context to those. Among the next steps we'll be doing is looking at some of the sites that the township owns and looking at how we can bring housing options that address some of the data points we found, address the objectives, as well as implement the master plan, looking at some sites that the township owns and how we can implement those types of strategies on those sites. So the 3 sites that we've started looking at that I can share with you today is the Savage Road parcel site. I realize Belleville split, but it should be one, the Tyler and Belleville site, as well as
freaking topic of conversation.
yeah, as well as the, I got Belle Isle on my mind, as well as Huron and the Martinsville site. So I showed this slide last time, but I just want to bring it back again just for context on the types. So when I bring up these housing types, you kind of know what I'm referring to. Middle housing is that middle range of housing between single-family homes and large-scale apartments. So these are your duplexes, triplexes, quadplex, multiplex, townhomes, live workspaces, and then other smaller scale apartment buildings. So when we talk about middle housing types, these are the types of developments that we're referring to. So on the Savage and Haggerty site, what I want to attempt to do now is give some context on the types of projects that could fit on a type of parcel, and then I'm going to kind of give some more details on what those could be. So for example, on this site, it is a residential parcel in a kind of residential fabric area, but we can suggest that you can do something with low to medium density, providing either senior housing at that scale or residential housing or smaller scale type of townhome development or something of that nature, as an example. At the Huron and Martinville site, it's, I believe that's your Riggs Park, if I said that right, but I think that's the parcel to that'd be the east of it, has some development opportunity. That parcel, again, could possibly hold some low to medium density senior housing with connections to the park. Or you could also, again, look at low to medium density townhome and residential housing, again, with connections into the park. That's another housing opportunity with land that the township owns today. I fixed the Belleville on this slide. But I think the golden site that the township is very interested in looking at is the Tyler and Belleville site. And I want to make a point. There are 3 types of developments that can go onto these types of parcels. You can have a strictly commercial and retail development, kind of like a mall or a series of strip malls. You could have a mixed use site, which is usually a form of residential, and then you can have other retail and commercial uses, which is your mixed use. But then you can also have mixed residential, which is primarily residential, but you have different types of housing types. So you could have a series of single-family homes, townhomes, and maybe an apartment building all within one parcel, rather than splitting these up and making them separate parcels with separate site planning. There are ways to combine these mixed residential uses into a single parcel, and I'll give some examples of what that can look like. So for this site, we are suggesting medium-dense mixed residential, so having those mixed residential types, and or a combination of providing mixed retail and commercial uses as well as those residential uses. So we kind of pulled back the idea of it being strictly commercial and retail, but trying to find a way to bring more of a mix of uses and residential types into that parcel. So this is a concept of a mixed use, and then I'll kind of show a mixed residential next. But this is a site out in Oxford, Ohio, and it's one big parcel, and there are kind of three things going on here. Towards the front, and this will be a road that you could compare to like a Michigan Ave. This one isn't as wide, but it's just as busy. So on the rear of the site here in this area, this is the rear. This is your Michigan Ave similar. This is all multifamily apartments. It's actually this specific building here towards the rear of the site. The green parcel you see to the left is actually a totally separate building. Again, more apartments. And everything you see in the front is retail, commercial, and then the Oxford also put in their municipal library on this site. So it has multiple functions. So this is kind of looking at it if you were in the middle of the street. To the right, this is their commercial. There's a Dunkin' Donuts and some other retail uses. Here's their public library. Again, the community worked with the developer to identify a site for that, and they incorporated it into the project. To the left of the screen, there's some restaurant, retail uses, and what you can't see is actually all that residential, which is behind all of this. So again, what I just showed you was all the retail in that blue square, and then all the residential that was included with this type of development was kind of screened and pushed to the back. I did walk this site. I was there. It's actually very nice, but I just wanted to give you a concept, an idea of what those types of mixed-use developments could look like. This is a different project. The community is going to come back to me in a moment, but this is what mixed residential could look like. Very similar, but again, this just has a lot more of a residential presence and a commercial and retail presence, where they have townhomes, apartments, and then they have some single-family options here on the right. And then to the left, you kind of get your standard commercial and residential mix. But this plan, however, is more leaning on the residential side. And then the previous concept shows leaning more towards retail, commercial, but also having residential. So just, again, I wanted to just give some context, because what we'll be doing next is taking those three sites and start applying these concepts to them, to see what fits, how dense can you get, what types of units, how will it look and impact traffic. We'll just start to really explore these things, but again, giving you context, so when you do see them come back in February 2025, you have that background.
Bring a condo a builder that builds one story.
I will say, because the reason why we're looking at township-owned land is because when the township owns land, you have a lot more teeth in terms of working with the developer and kind of saying what you actually want. So you can, if the township, if that's the direction, you can just be very clear. We want everything to be one story.
Not everything, but more than we got now.
Yes. But the point, you have that
That's a good
flexibility.
question. Just to be clear, Van Buren Township isn't in the business of building homes, right? We don't build homes. We're not going to go out and be a developer and build this. You're not advocating that. You're using this as an example of land that the township currently owns, that if the township were to want to make a sale arrangement to someone, this is something that land could be used for if a developer was located with the right level of interest.
That is correct.
I always like to make sure we're clear. The township doesn't build things. We don't build gas stations. We don't build apartments. We approve plans, but we don't build them.
What we're doing is coming up with a model and then saying, if we like this concept, you kind of have two options. One, we're going to look at making changes to the zoning ordinance to kind of allow these types of things overall. But then you can also take this concept and give it to someone and say, this is what we want. We've had a year's worth of meetings about it. Make it happen. So you have that option.
Thank you.
Okay, so I'm near the end. So I just want to give you an update on where we are schedule-wise. We're kind of right almost in the middle. We're still on track. We just had to adjust 2 meetings. So we're here in December. We're having this meeting. So your November Number 6, your diagnostic meeting, we're having that one here today in December. And then number 8, which is your middle housing concepts, which is kind of everything we just went over. That meeting, we're going to push it back into February. So we'll still be on track. That won't change too much, just that month we'll adjust. During the interim, what we'll also be drafting is starting to build out how we're going to do our engagement survey. And we'll have some information coming up soon. We just want to make sure that we'd have some form of community engagement in this project. Expect to see us in February. We'll have some context. We will either have already released a form of survey or we'll be getting ready to release that with your blessings. And then we'll come back again second quarter with the concepts that you all would have seen and kind of gave us the soft thumbs up on. We will kind of create some zoning recommendations, and then we'll bring those back for a final discussion. That would be, it says March, I think it'd be March or April in 2025. Okay.
Fantastic. Very nice presentation, Donovan. Really appreciate what work that you've gone through in establishing this.
Through the chair, I would like to just ask some questions. I don't know if it's too late, but we have that shopping center on the corner of the Service Drive and Rossonville Road, the former Kmart. It looks like it's completely empty now. I'm not 100% positive.
2 stores left.
2 stores, what is it?
Little Caesars and Little Caesars.
All I heard was Little Caesars. What was
Dollar
it?
store.
Dollar store.
The dollar store is
I know you've identified 3 spots already. Is that a possibility that we could add that location to? Because we could put some nice ranches on that big lot.
You want to go ahead?
No, you can go ahead.
Yeah. So I'm not going to say no. We could. I'll just give some context. The reason why we picked those 3 sites is because the township owns them.
owns the property.
Not to say that you still can't apply these concepts to private developers and they can choose to elect those. So we can, but contextually, we chose the township-owned sites.
I see, okay. Well, I can just add that we keep saying every year that we're gonna like focus on that area. It's owned by Showstack. And the only information I ever saw about it was, I believe it was U-Haul looked at it and we said no right away before they even gave us a presentation. But I think that it's looking pretty dilapidated. We gotta like put some eyes on it and give it some attention. So sorry to go off, but I know that it has a view of the lake if we were to consider putting a high-rise there.
We have a steering committee meeting next week, so we can, I'll make sure it gets brought up.
I think it's called Lakeview Crest. I can't remember the name of it.
Lakeview Shopping Center, I believe.
Lakeview Shopping Center. Could I ask a question of the?
Sure.
Donovan, so the work you're doing is meant to apply to all the parcels in the township. This is sort of an incentive development thing for outside developers to consider. Once we implement these plans, it makes a framework of rules that if a developer were to come into the township and say, that's a beautiful piece of undeveloped land, or that's a shopping center that I think I could do something with, the idea here is that then staff can direct them to this report and say, well, this is the sort of development that Van Buren Township would love to see a developer bring in and potentially do, correct?
Half and half. I think this report will serve as background to the decision, but ultimately we're going to be providing you recommendation to the zoning ordinance. So this could play out, I'll give 2 ways. If it were a zoning district itself, then it would only apply to that district, and a developer would have to rezone that particular parcel to do it. So that in that scenario, you wouldn't be applying it to the entire township, only those parcels that the commission deems worthy of this type of development. And that may be the best way to do it versus the other option where you open it up and that has just more ways that it could kind of go left or right. So I think the way that we'll probably come with the recommendation without tying my hands to a action would be to likely create a district and then these would be the regulations to that district that
Oh,
a
I
developer
see.
could request.
I see. Could you tell me, refresh my memory again, it's the Housing Readiness Incentive Grant. Grant means money.
Yes.
What's the story there? Were we given a grant in order for you to do this
Yes.
report so that we can help craft our zoning ordinances?
So, yeah. So it is a grant. It's for $45,000, and the final outcome of this grant in any community is to either update your zoning ordinance via a formal adoption, so it would go through here and then the township board, or it is a update or an amendment to your master plan, which again goes through the planning commission and ultimately the township board. So those are the two primary reasons. I really haven't seen too many other uses for this grant because
And so this is we're being incentivized to update our zoning ordinances to help with housing readiness throughout the township. Got it. The showing the township-owned parcels was just a little bit confusing to me, but I get it now. I see what we're doing. Thanks, Donovan.
Along that line, the last time we reviewed the master plan was 2020. Am I correct?
Well, so that was the last time we looked at the comprehensive update. They did do master plan amendments in 21 or 22 for Sumter Road corridor.
Sure.
So we have updated things more recently than that, but
Am I mistaken? We have to evaluate the master plan every 5 years? So we're due for another review of the master plan at this time as well?
yes, correct.
So this lines up.
So
It was a very timely grant program by the state of Michigan.
right on time. You are right on time for the zoning ordinance. I think you may be a year short of your master plan update. But by the time you get this done, you'll be ready to update your master plan, and you would have had all the background studies and information, because about less than a month ago, the state of Michigan amended the Planning and Zoning Enabling Act, so where the comprehensive and master plans now require housing sections, which was not a requirement, 2-3 months ago, which is why a lot of communities don't have housing in their master plans. So you'll be right on track a year from now. You would have had all the background studies, all your market analysis. Everything should still be kind of relevant a year from now. And then you'll be ready to update your master plan if you choose to do so, or amend it, but you'll be right on track.
Thanks.
Great.
Yeah.
Thank you. Anybody else? Comments? Thank you.
Thank you.
Great presentation and tons of great information.
Thank you. I look forward to coming back in the new year.
Same here, Donovan. Look forward to hear what you have to present to us. Brings us to item number 4. The Belleville Road Overlay District Height and Setback Ordinance Draft, a discussion concerning it. Presentation by the township staff. Director Akers.
I will turn it over to Mr. Belko from McKenna and Associates to take over.
Thank you, Mr. Akers and Chair Cullen. I'm not nearly as entertaining as Donovan, but I'm going to run through kind of what our charge was in this case and provide some recommendations for next steps. In October, the Planning Commission directed us to study and provide recommendations for alternative building height standards in the B-Rod district. This was to address issues related to limited ceiling heights and creative building design as a result of the B-Rod regulations. The B-Rod has established sub-areas, and there are unique considerations for both of these. In your core commercial sub-area, which is mostly C1 and C2 zoning, this limits new development building height to 4 stories and 40 feet. Similarly, in the Gateway mixed-use sub-area, 4 stories, 40-foot tall buildings along certain street types. In the B-Rod, they do require some horizontal step backs, so that's the building being recessed on a different story for some visual interest. But this isn't clearly defined. What is the required step back, what sort of amenities or other considerations for that regulation. Ultimately, if someone were to build a 4-story building in the B-Rod, It would result in an average floor-to-ceiling height of well under 10 feet when you account for building systems and finishes, and that's just a flat roof building. There's less flexibility for taller buildings with non-flat, gable, hip, shed roofs, which could potentially deter certain types of development that would be appropriate for this district. So right now, we're recommending that the Planning Commission consider allowing for additional building heights up to 50 feet in the B-ROD district, conditioned upon some additionally defined setbacks and stepbacks. However, I'd like to note that the 4-story limit would remain the same, just looking at height in feet. You'll see that we did some analysis of some smaller and denser built-out communities. We believe that the intent and purpose of the B-ROD is to encourage the type of pedestrian scale and quality development seen in these core commercial areas. So we took a look at Lake Orion, Grosse Pointe, and Birmingham. You'll notice that in each case, they allow for 4-story or sometimes 5-story buildings that can exceed 40 feet, so 42, 54, and 58 in that table below. And they do require step backs. In Lake Orion, the 4th story has to be a step back 10 feet from the main building facade. In Grosse Pointe, it's 15 feet, or you can provide a mansard roof, which I don't recommend, for the 4th story. In Birmingham, similarly, it's a 10-foot setback or a 45-degree step back for visual height. So from corner to the corner of the story below to the corner of the story above, it has to have that 45-degree sight clearance. So we kind of distilled those findings in that table for you. And just to note that depending on the sub area in certain communities, buildings with more than 3 stories can go all the way up to 58 feet. I did include that in the chart for Birmingham. There are some use restrictions in some of these communities, but I don't believe that would be appropriate in the B-ROD. So in conclusion, I'm on page 67, by the way. Higher ceiling heights are prevalent in almost all new commercial enterprises and mixed-use buildings. The existing height and story limit is reasonable for many commercial uses and restaurants, retail stores. But if a building were to require additional stories, 3, 4 stories, such as home improvement stores or hotels, it would be challenged by the current limitations. So based on our research, our findings, and kind of the general understanding of the Planning Commission's interest in studying this, we think the township would benefit to extend allowances for additional height in feet under certain circumstances, and I discussed those below. There is already setback increases for industrial districts, so for every additional foot of height, you have to step the building back another foot. This is the same in the B-ROD, but it does lack some specificity. So I think all of these items can be captured in a footnote, where when it's describing the maximum building height in the B-ROD district, being 4 stories or 40 feet, asterisk. 4-story buildings may be permitted to go up to 50 feet, provided that for each foot of additional height over 40 feet or fraction thereof, the front setback shall be increased by 2 feet. So that gives you more green space and landscaping area, and which I described, the sum of which will be in the form of foundation landscaping and plantings. Further, for any 4-story building over 40 feet, the facade of the 4th story shall be stepped back no less than 10 feet from the facade of the 3rd story on all sides that have street frontage. Further, this area shall contain garden terraces, landscaped or green roofs, solar panels, or other environmental features or user amenities as approved by the Planning Commission. And I do provide a draft of this ordinance language under separate cover as well. Thank you.
Thank you. I believe we have some discussion. Anybody on the commission? Comments?
Well, it looks like, in comparison to Lake Orion, Grosse Pointe, and Birmingham, it looks like we're a little behind. I'd like to catch up, because the last thing I want is for a builder, a developer to look at us behind their computer and go scratch, forget them, we need to go to Canton. Scratch, forget them, we need to go to Ypsilanti. And during our last master plan, when we did the community engagement, we did surveys, our population was going to Ann Arbor and Canton to go out to dinner and to go to the movies, to go shopping. I don't know if I said Ann Arbor, but they were going to Ann Arbor and Canton. And I'd rather keep them here. So I'm all for it.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to ask Mr. Belka, how'd we get to 50 feet? Why isn't it 56 feet or 58 feet high? I mean, Birmingham is a 50, you said the problem is the story height. And if we're gonna allow a fifth story, how'd we get to 50 instead of say 58 or 60 or 52?
Oh, sure. Just to clarify, the number of stories will remain the same. So it'll still be 4 stories.
It is?
4 stories.
Oh, we're still only gonna allow 4 stories. Oh, I see. We're not going to 5
We're just
stories.
increasing the height of each story.
Story.
I missed that.
Yeah.
I missed that. Why aren't we going to 5?
I wish we were, but we gotta take baby steps. We gotta stay behind everybody else.
Then we gotta have elevators.
We have to have them now to have even a second story.
DAs.
Yeah, but I'm all for the 5. We ready to get ahead of Lake Orion, Grosse Pointe, and Birmingham?
Well, Birmingham is at 5. Be hard to get ahead of that.
So what this change will really allow is instead of building a 4-story, 40-foot building, you can build a 3-story, 50-foot building as long as you guess 3 real stories and 1 little half a story? And they go up to 50 feet? What are we talking about? Like a hotel with a athletic center on the top or something? What are we doing this for?
Through the chair, could it allow for a 3-story with a peak roof? I mean, that,
Oh, that would be allowable in the existing regulations. What,
past 40 feet is what I'm saying. So if you have 3 stories, peak roof, past 40 feet,
so these allowances, additional allowances and requirements are for 4-story buildings only. Yep. So you could have a 3-story building that goes up to 40 feet, but it can't exceed that. Only 4-story buildings can exceed the 40-foot limit.
Are we not
Kim.
making any changes? When we're saying 40 feet, we're not gonna make any changes to that?
Not to the base requirement. I think it's appropriate to limit 2- and 3-story buildings to a lesser nominal height.
Just be then increasing the height.
Of a
Right,
4-story.
So the first,
To allow a greater ceiling height, I would assume.
For ceiling height, it provides recommendations for additional amenities, and it allows for more interesting building types, I would say. 4-story building that has a more interesting roof or a terrace, and that would be appropriate.
For maybe a construction of where they might put a meeting room in that might extend up and force
Event center, conference room, yeah, exactly.
story to go up higher
Exactly.
type thing.
Yep.
So we can currently have a 4-story flat roof rectangular cubicle building. It can be 40 feet tall. This would change the height and allow it to go up to 50 as long as instead of a complete 4th floor, it's a shrunken 4th floor.
Exactly, and with additional amenities on that 4th floor, like terraces, solar array, balconies, garden roofs.
hot tub, a pool.
Exactly, yeah.
I get
exactly.
my hat hot tubs in Ann Arbor.
The Oasis in Ann Arbor.
I'm just kidding. I guess I'm just asking, why don't we just raise the height of the building? Just, why do we want to have why don't we just raise the height to 50 feet and be done with it? I'm just asking as a devil's advocate.
I like your devil's advocate.
So
Why do we need all this extra verbiage? Why don't we just raise the building height to 50 feet and 4 stories?
the reason why some of the terracing standards are put in there is because the B-Rod ordinance definition currently has a requirement for, I think it's terracing on that 4th floor. So it specifies that, yeah, there should be terracing, but it doesn't say how much. So if you terrace, 6 inches, a foot, 10 feet. And so what this does is it specifies, kind of what that expectation is for terracing. And that's why some of the added language was put in to kind of give some clarification from what was existing in our zoning code.
I'm not against it. I just was, looking at it as if the problem is we can't build a 4-story building because we need 10 extra feet, why don't we just allow 10 extra feet and be done with it? But if it's got some logic with the terracing and it seems like it makes sense, then, I trust our consultants to come up with the good ordinance changes. I just sometimes want to know what the thought process was.
I appreciate those questions.
I'm thinking that the property owned by the township, Belleville and Tyler Road, I would imagine this is gonna be needed. So this is good that we're getting ahead of it.
Exactly, and we're not proposing any use restrictions, like a 4-story building can only have residential on that 4th floor, might not be necessary. So it allows for a wide variety of development.
Okay. Anything else? Then the next thing I see on the agenda for this item is to schedule a public hearing for a change in the zoning ordinance. If we all agree that we like it,
Yeah.
then I
think we should direct
guess
staff to schedule
move
it.
forward with a public hearing. Okay? We don't need a motion on that, do we?
No. No, I can handle that.
Okay, that brings us to item number 5. Non-residential PUD ordinance draft. Discussion. Presentation by the staff.
Commissioner Cullen. So I'll kind of give an overview. So this was before the Planning Commission in October 2024, earlier this year. So the purpose of it was, the zoning ordinance for the township has regulations for PRDs, which are planned residential developments. These type of ordinances encourage flexible land use options for residential developments only. The township in our ordinance does not have the same flexible development options for non-residential oriented developments. So at the meeting in October, the Planning Commission chose to assign a subcommittee the task of going through this draft ordinance and making adjustments and modifying it to go through and making sure questions were answered regarding the code. And so that's what we did. So there was a subcommittee of Commissioner Grant, Commissioner Jar, and Commissioner Creel. We probably met 4 or 5 times, I would say, going through various drafts of the code. We're going through various changes and adjustments of the ordinance. And so what is before the Planning Commission this evening is the result of that effort. There were a few outstanding comments, as the Planning Commission would have seen, some highlighted items that were questions for the township attorney. I actually received answers to some of those questions this afternoon. So there are a couple things that we're gonna have to take a look at and make sure that we're consistent with. So at this time, I'm not gonna recommend scheduling a public hearing.
Oh, okay.
Because there are a couple things that the attorney asked us to take a look at, which we'll take a look at and bring back at the next meeting, just to make sure we're buttoning everything up. And also, I know Commissioner Grant spoke with me this morning. He apologized he was going to be unable to make the meeting this evening, but he did indicate that he wanted a little bit of time to take a look at a couple things. So, so with that, that is where we are at on the ordinance definition. I guess I would ask the planning commission, because I know our planning director, Ms. Krishnan, kind of went through some of the purposes of the ordinance, and kind of went through some of the sections at our last meeting where we brought it up. Does the planning commission want me or Mr. Belko to kind of go through the code and offer some explanations for how it's structured? I know, or do some of the commissioners who are participating in the subcommittee want to discuss some of the changes that were made? Not sure exactly how we want to format it.
Mr. Chairman, I would suggest that since we'll have to have it come back to us again for recommendation for public hearing, that we could go over the more detailed summary for the rest of the commission at a future meeting.
Okay.
Once we have those attorney comments in. Seems like that would be, we have it, the rest of the commission hasn't, take some time to read it, and I don't think we need to go over it in this meeting. It's 7:45. And it's long. I was on the subcommittee. It's long. So I will say that it was a good back and forth on the subcommittee. We had a lot of edits and a lot of feedback from Commissioners Creel and Grant, going over the intent and what we wanted it to cover, and we looked at a lot of conditions and what ifs, and I think that the draft ordinance is in a state where I'd feel, barring a few of the comments that are still in yellow, I feel very good about presenting it to the rest of the commission as a good planned unit development. I feel like I'm convinced this is a tool that we could have in our arsenal, and we could review it in detail at a future meeting.
So,
It's a good thought.
With that, I would say if there are any comments that the planning commission has about the ordinance or questions, please, if you feel comfortable, ask now, because that's the time. If not, feel free to contact me after the meeting, and I will be happy to have that conversation with everyone.
okay. Moving ahead, we have the planning commission meeting schedule in front of us. The only one I'm concerned with is the January 8th, because upon my discussion with Director Akers, the township is going to be closed from the 20th through January 5th. You will open on January 6th, which is 2 days before our meeting. And we may not have much to go forth on the agenda at that point.
So we don't have any current development proposals that are going to be lined up for that January 8th meeting. If there is anything that's going to be on the January 8th agenda, it was going to be the public hearing for this B-Rod district, and then it would be for this B-Rod, ordinance amendment changes, and then it would be the PUD discussion ordinance item. Those would probably be the only two things on the agenda. If the planning commission does want to meet, I can get the public hearing notices out and I can get the packets prepared before we close on the 19th. So I can have everything ready and raring for everybody to go. But of course, that's going to be subject to.
Yeah, that's basically why the board isn't meeting on the 7th, because nobody's going to be here the week before, and to try to get it together, they just decided they would not have that meeting. And I almost think the planning commission ought to do the same thing. We shouldn't make somebody come in and try to get an agenda together with pulling in a secretary and Ron and his staff. I think we should not be.
I agree.
I agree, especially if the board's not meeting.
Yeah.
Wholeheartedly agree.
Anybody not agree?
Update. Director Akers is going to have to update the schedule and repost it if we strike January 8th. But I think that's fine. This is the schedule that we're voting on with the change. So I looked at the dates. They all fall on the correct date. So it all looked pretty good to me, except for the January 8th question. So, Mr. Chair, if it was okay to entertain a motion, I move that we move to approve the schedule with the modification that the January 8th meeting shall be canceled.
Okay, do we have a support? Motion by Commissioner Jar, support by Commissioner Poole and Commissioner Atchison for accepting the meeting as presented, except for the January 8th. And I believe we can do that by roll call, or I mean by,
The secretary looks ready to go.
does she want to say something down there? By voice vote? Yeah, good. All in favor signify by aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, motion carries. Next item up is election of officers for this next year. And the first one up is for the chairperson. Commissioner Poe.
Nomination.
Yes.
Mhm.
I nominate, I would nominate Brian Cullen for a second term.
Second that nomination.
Second term is
Accept.
Wholeheartedly support.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Vice Chair.
Through the chair, I'd like to nominate Jeff Jar to be, continue on as the vice chairman.
Mr. Chairman, I would accept that nomination were it to be supported.
Support.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
I should ask, was there any other nominations is what I should have asked for along the way. Nah, okay. And we have a secretary.
I make a motion that we nominate Medina Atchison to assume that job.
Support.
Yeah.
Accept it or deny it, guys, before you
Not really, but yes, you can accept or deny.
accept it. Thank you. Lovely.
Any other nominations? All in favor signify by aye. And now we go to primary liaison to the Board of Zoning Appeals.
Oh, go ahead, Sherry.
Okay, because of the rules as to who sets that, it is the supervisor of the township sets that. So I would make a motion that we send to the board the recommendation that Brian Cullen, because he is the chair of the planning commission, be the person that is the liaison to the Board of Zoning Appeals, and we would recommend that Jeff Jar be the alternate.
Okay.
Support.
I'm happy with that. Is that the current arrangement? I think the current arrangement, or the
You
the
were
last year's
primary and
arrangement
I
was
was
flip-flopped.
secondary.
I don't know if that matters for the board.
Well, the rules say that the chair has to be the rep.
Hmm,
So that means you need to be the rep, and then Jeff can be the alternate.
Okay. Okay.
I'm
That
okay,
works.
I'm okay with flip-flopping it if the
Okay.
chairman's okay with flip-flopping.
Yes,
That's
we'll
fine with me.
flip-flop. We'll flip-flop. Okay, that brings us to general, and you've got the rules and procedures. Was that just for our information, Director Akers?
It was for the election of officers, just so, because the language with the Board of Zoning Appeals is in the rules of procedure. So, just for reference.
Okay. Then that leads us to general discussion and updates. Do we have anything?
1,000 Sumter, so I just wanted, you asked, it had been asked at a previous meeting. So 1,000 Sumter was granted a building permit for the facade alterations. There's a condition on the building permit where when the first occupant comes to occupy it, they're gonna come before the planning commission for parking considerations and for, I think it was signage. But that is what happened. They have been issued a building permit and they have been getting inspected by the building inspectors and, the old Cork and Bottle. There is nothing proposed at this time that I've been aware of. It's just the owners are updating the facade of the structure, improving parking and lighting and
Yeah,
that type
they
of stuff.
resurfaced the parking lot and new windows, and it looks nice. Anything else?
No, other than I just want to wish the commission a happy holidays.
That was the next thing I forgot on our last meeting to wish everyone a happy Thanksgiving. Hope everyone had a lot of turkey and enjoyed family and friends. And I guess we're to that point that the holidays are upon us. Hope everyone has a happy one. Thank you for attending and looking forward to a new start in a new year. And I guess, is there anything else from anyone?
I'd just say it's a pleasure serving with all of you.
Absolutely. I think we've got a very good commission, and I enjoy every one of you and your
And a
opinions.
special shout out to everyone who attends this meeting through its entirety every time. We really appreciate our audience.
Yes. Rosemary, you have a very happy holiday as well.
Please.
And with that, I would entertain a motion to,
So moved to
Oh,
adjourn.
support.
and to support. All in favor? Aye.
See you next year.
Absolutely.
Shoo.
Woo.
Hey, he was talking about the ponds at Sumter in Hull Road. Those were Denny Wilkins.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a lot of
Did he dig them?
I'd like
Yeah.
to know about.
Yeah, there was an email that came from a gentleman.
Meeting's closed, so
Saying,
don't
Yeah.
do it, don't get public, don't do your public business.
Don't tell me the other name.
Happy holidays, everyone. Thanks for having us.
Nice seeing you there, Mr. Belko.
Yes, Mr. Belko, have a good one.
Your time at home
And,
with you.
Michael, have a good one.
Do and ask for forgiveness kind of deal. Try to
Good night.
Good night. Have a happy holiday.
He's saying that
Yeah.
while they're flooding them out. That's what he's flooding his property.
our constituent services went out there and our property.